Strong winds and heavy rain from Hurricane George pounding Puerto Rico. And now those conditions are spreading over the eastern portion of the Dominican Republic. Good morning and welcome to Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso. Hurricane George continues its path of destruction as it exits Puerto Rico for new ground. And it looks like that territory is going to be the Dominican Republic. And now that could be a serious threat for the southeast U.S. later on this week. And if you are going to be out and about in the U.S. during the day today, we do have the forecast for several cities for you, such as San Francisco. It should be a cool day with highs in the 60s. Denver's fog will dissolve, but clouds will remain, while showers remain on and off in New York City. First, though, let's get the latest on Hurricane George from Rick Griffin in the Forecast Center. Rick?
Thanks a lot, Mark. Good morning. As you mentioned, Hurricane George now making landfall again. The eye of the hurricane now on shore in the eastern sections of the Dominican Republic. Coming up, we'll have some spectacular satellite pictures for you. Visible satellite pictures just in to show you just how intense and how ominous Hurricane George is. First, though, we want to talk about the position, which is at 18.2 north, 68.5 west, 80 miles or so east-southeast of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. Top sustained winds are 110, but remember, wind gusts are higher than that, particularly over exposed higher terrain. The movement west at 14 and the pressure 970 millibars. Well, Hurricane George's winds took their toll on Puerto Rico overnight. This morning, those who could brave going out found downed trees and debris all over the roads, and many roads are closed or impassable because of downed poles and trees this morning. Waves remain high on the coast. Heavy rain still blown by the wind has created life-threatening mudslides, and those finding shelter were still at risk too. Windows were blown out of the hotel you saw there, the ballroom, creating a dangerous situation for those trying to huddle inside. By the way, the winds gusted 85 to 95 miles an hour in San Juan and Roosevelt roads, and a top wind gust of 130 miles per hour recorded on the eastern end of the island. Let's go now to someone who actually experienced the hurricane firsthand. That's Scott Stripling, the supervisory meteorologist at the National Weather Service in San Juan. Scott, perhaps you can briefly describe what you went through last night.
Well, we pretty much got nailed last night. The storm came in on the southeast coast and probably produced the damage you were showing there in that ballroom in the Conquistador Hotel in Fajardo on the northwest and northern side of the eye walls. It moved in. The hurricane then went pretty much westerly across the island. Here in San Juan, about 6:30 or 7, we started getting squalls and strong gusts of hurricane force. And then some sustained winds, 75 to 85 with gusts over 90. But those numbers that we were talking about were from an automated system on the airport grounds, and I think it was a little wind shaded, so they're probably a little bit low.
Okay, now that the worst part of the hurricane is moving away, are you experiencing fairly steadily improving conditions now?
Wind-wise, we've definitely improved. We're probably only looking at 20 to 30 mile an hour winds here in the San Juan area with a few higher gusts. However, the rainfall still continues on and off, and you can see on your satellite photograph there's a kidney bean shaped big cluster of convection or thunderstorm activity to our southeast that's going to lift northward and continue to produce heavy to torrential rain across the island, as well as the Virgin Islands throughout the whole day.
Scott, Dr. Steve Lyons is here, and I think he has a question for you.
Yeah, just wondering, Scott, how is the river levels and the flooding situation there? Do you expect potential flash flooding today with that shower activity that's going to continue?
Oh, most definitely. We still have flash flood warnings in effect for the entire island as well as the Virgin Islands. Most of the rivers have peaked, but they're 10, 15, 20 feet out of their banks. However, with this additional rainfall, we're going to get a secondary peak today. So residents are out investigating what's going on, examining their homes and property, or trying to do a little repairs. Need to be very, very careful. We don't want to lose anyone else while they're out today as the rivers begin to rise and either further flooding occurs.
Okay, that's Scott Stripling. Scott, thank you very much for joining us. He's the supervisory meteorologist in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Future problems with George now that it's moving into the Dominican Republic and Haiti. Here's a look at what could be happening. Of course, devastating winds, storm surge. Steve, perhaps one of the more significant problems, life-threatening problems, is going to be the excessive rainfall and extensive mudslides, rock slides, and flash flooding.
Yeah, that could be a problem. Of course, there are a couple of reasons for that. One, we have very, very high mountains here compared to Puerto Rico. Two, the island is very steep. Three, the thunderstorm activity around the circulation has become better defined than it was. And finally, the storm is moving a little bit slower, so it'll linger over the island longer. And the combination of all those things is just looking like, in combination with the storm surge along the coast here and here, Santo Domingo as well, after the eye passes through, we could really have some nasty situations there with rain.
We have a different type of satellite picture to look at. You're looking at the infrared picture, or the colorized one. We have visible satellite now that the sun's come up, and I think we can go to that perhaps. And if we can see a spectacular view, as you would see it if you were looking down from the top of Hurricane George.
That's exactly right. It's if you were looking down, you can see the eye right impinging on the east coast of the coast of Dominican Republic. And there is a close-up version there. You're looking right down almost to the sea surface there. As you're looking down, extremely well-defined eye. Right here on this north coast now, they would be getting a storm surge of probably 5 to 8 feet, maybe higher. And as the eye passes the Santo Domingo area, which is right in here, this area is very prone to storm surge. They could get storm surge as high as 10 or 12 feet there, so be very, very careful if you're near the coast.
And don't let your guard down as the calm of the eye goes overhead.
Absolutely, that's a big mistake.
Okay, and in Puerto Rico this morning, Steve, conditions remain rather rough, and on radar we can see heavy rain bands still moving in. Some places have had nearly 2 feet of rain so far.
That's right. Unfortunately, we're going to lose this radar that's up here in the Coqui rainforest here, but these rain bands are the ones that Scott was talking about and what I had mentioned earlier, that are maybe the ones that make the flow over the banks really serious for flooding.
Okay, the hurricane warnings, they've been dropped for the Virgin Islands, improving conditions today. Puerto Rico still under a hurricane warning, Hispaniola too, parts of the Bahamas, hurricane watch, southeast Cuba, the wind field. Remember, don't focus on just the center, because the wind field is rather large with Hurricane George. And again, Steve, what do you think down the road? Obviously not a situation where you'd panic in the southeast United States, but certainly we should monitor the situation.
Your ears should be definitely perked, so to speak, and keep monitoring very carefully. The time frame there would be roughly 3 days if it continues in a west-northwest track, and of course hurricane warnings could be put up within 2 days, and a hurricane watch could be put up in a day and a half for the South Florida area. However, it's still too early to do that. The thing we have to keep in mind, we have uncertainty in the forecast as we go out, but generally a west or west-northwest track should persist here the next 24 to 48 hours, and then out in this area it should be generally in that general vicinity, but we do not see anything that's going to cause it to turn.
San Juan, Puerto Rico takes a beating from Hurricane George, and now the Dominican Republic is feeling the storm's wrath. Good morning and welcome to Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso. As George continues on its path to the west, the winds have increased, the pressures have dropped, and now the hurricane warnings are being extended farther towards the west. We have changes to talk about, and with all the updated information on Hurricane George, here's Rick Griffin in the Forecast Center.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Good morning. In fact, the latest statement says that George is relentlessly pounding the eastern Dominican Republic with now 120-mile-per-hour winds. That's right. George has gone from a strong Category 2 to a Category 3 storm, although in the last hour or so there's probably been a little bit of weakening. The hurricane feeling the effects of the very high mountainous terrain in Hispaniola, and Dr. Steve Lyons will be with us to talk a little bit about that and the future track of George and whether it will affect the United States in just a moment. First of all, the brand new information: 18.3 north, 69.1 west. That puts the eye of George 35 miles east-southeast of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. Top sustained winds 120. And George is moving west at 14. The central pressure has continued to drop and is now standing at 962 millibars, according to the Air Force reconnaissance plane that's been flying through George this morning. Well, as you know, San Juan, Puerto Rico is still feeling the fury of Hurricane George, although conditions are steadily improving, particularly as far as the winds are concerned, not so much the rain. We'll talk more about that in a second. At least 6 storm-related fatalities have been reported, and more than 70% of the island's 3.8 million people are without electricity and water this morning. Countless roads and highways have been cut off by falling trees, power lines, power poles, and other debris. Top winds in Puerto Rico, 130 miles per hour on the eastern end of the island. There's been a lot of rain, some 2 feet of rainfall in some locations, and that has prompted or produced mudslides. And actually, most of the fatalities have been due to mudslides on the island of Puerto Rico. Well, joining me now is Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane expert. Steve, again, the winds are diminishing in Puerto Rico, but the rain is still falling, and it is still very heavy in some cases.
Yeah, we still have that band of heavy rain on the backside of the hurricane, and it keeps coming into Puerto Rico. Here you can see it here on the radar. Ponce, Puerto Rico is generally in this area, a fairly heavily populated area of Puerto Rico, probably the second largest city, if I'm not incorrect. And this continuous band of rain is going to continue to sweep in there. It's going to slowly move its way over toward the Mayaguez area and then finally get out of the way. But already we have a lot of flooding there, and that's just going to exacerbate the problem.
By the way, the hurricane warnings for Puerto Rico have now been discontinued. That's a new update, and we'll be talking more about where the warnings are now as we configure our graphic concerning the watches and the warnings. But first of all, let's go to our colorized satellite picture, and then don't go away because we have a spectacular visible satellite picture to show you. But first, a satellite takes a picture of the temperature and gives us a good idea of the structure. And Steve, it looks like, as you mentioned last time, the cloud tops on the northwest side are getting warmer. Is that a result of the high mountains there?
That is an indication of the interaction with the landmass there. You can see it there, not orange in the northwest quadrant, and that's great news. The longer it can stay over land, the weaker it's going to get. However, it's also the worse it's going to be for the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So we don't want to wish anything bad on people. At the same time, the only way to kill it is to, well, not the only way, but one way to kill it is to keep it over land.
Absolutely, particularly an island that has 10,000-foot mountains.
That is correct.
Disrupt it a bit, but once it comes out on the other side, it could regenerate very quickly.
Yes, it could, and we're expecting it to. What happens on the other side is rather critical because the intensity is going to increase once it gets off the other side over here, but it would be very, very nice to have a very weak hurricane or tropical storm, but it's possible that it could remain a little better intact. Clearly, if it runs across this portion of the island over the high mountains, it's going to come out much weaker than if it goes just up to the north and then continues on a more westward track.
Well, Steve, let's look at the hurricane as you would see it if you were looking down, if you were in the space shuttle or something like that, directly from above our visible satellite picture. What are you seeing here? Yeah,
you can see here's the circulation center. The eye is right in there. Of course, I keep moving it depending on the motion, but very strong winds around the core of the hurricane here. That's the eye wall there. You can see it's temporarily made a tiny little jog toward the north. Again, those temporary motions are insignificant in the overall direction of motion. Do not project that out into the future. It's just a temporary wobble on its general course toward the west-northwest.
The largest city nearby is Santo Domingo. They're going to get hit very hard here soon.
Yes, that's generally in this area. On the backside, where the wind's coming up out of the south, that's going to drive a storm surge in there that could approach 10 feet there. So they need to be very careful along the coast. If they're in a low-lying area, they need to evacuate that area if they're told to do so.
All right, Steve, let's go to the watches and warnings. I want to just basically go read them because they've changed. The hurricane warnings have been discontinued for Puerto Rico. A new hurricane warning for the eastern part of Cuba. Also hurricane warnings for the Dominican Republic and Haiti, the Turks and the Caicos, southeast Bahamas. A hurricane watch is now in effect for the central Bahamas. So we'll have this graphic updated for you as quickly as we can. On to the wind field. Steve, again, extensive tropical storm force wind field there, some 350 miles across at least.
And that's why really the entire Dominican Republic and Haitian island there is going to be covered by significantly strong winds. Of course, the core is going to be around the eye, but keep in mind, when you're looking at something coming at you, you should look at this scale, not the tiny scale of the eye.
Right. Okay, let's talk now, Steve, about the potential effect on the United States. We're going to set up a graphic for you here because already there is a phased evacuation in effect for Monroe County, which is the Florida Keys. Can you elaborate a little bit about
that? What happens there is, of course, the Keys are south of the Dade County, which is a huge population area, and if you start evacuating Dade County, it clogs the roadways. You can't get people out of Monroe County. So you really need to pay attention to when you're supposed to evacuate. I know some people say, I'm getting out of here right now, I don't want to even consider it. If the roads are clear, then go ahead. But do not clog the roads when you're trying to get people out, because the worst possible thing is to have the people from Monroe County and the Keys trying to get out and stuck there and unable to get out. There's still plenty of time to leave and evacuate if you're in Dade County. So just sit tight, but monitor the situation.
Absolutely.
Now. It's still a long way out.
And the timing with the arrival potentially in South Florida.
Yeah, it's still about 650 miles to the west-southwest here. You can see that's roughly where it is. Here's Dade County, South Florida. It's got a long way to go. We're talking still about 72-hour time frame. This latest 72-hour hurricane forecast position is roughly right in here. But keep in mind, the air associated with that is fairly large. So we're still talking about roughly 3 days.
Okay, Steve Lyons, we'll talk to you again at 1/2 the hour. Meanwhile, don't forget weather.com. You can get the latest on George and other weather across the country, and you can do that right now with Kristen back in the studio.
Thank you very much, Rick. And we are looking at a pretty good day shaping up here along the West Coast, Seattle and Portland and Los Angeles. You're going to see lots of sunshine. And welcome back to Storm Watch. Hurricane George cut a path of destruction across Puerto Rico overnight, and now it is heading toward the Dominican Republic. And as George tears its way across the Caribbean, there is now a request for visitors and non-residents of the Florida Keys to leave the area. Let's go ahead and see where Hurricane George is at this hour. And you can see the center of the hurricane is now beginning to push on land in the Dominican Republic. Overnight, it brought torrential rains to Puerto Rico, also very strong winds, as we had reports of up to 130-mile-an-hour wind gusts in some of the higher terrain. That's also where the highest rainfall was, with about 23 inches being recorded. Now this continues to push off to the west, and we'll be bringing the very strong winds, torrential downpours to the Dominican Republic. They have mountain areas here that are up to 10,000 feet, and once all this moisture runs into that mountain, it's going to be squeezed out in the form of torrential downpours. There's a big concern here of landslides through the Dominican Republic and also Haiti. So we're going to keep you posted on this. Taking a look at the Doppler radar from Puerto Rico and San Juan, you can still see they are seeing the effects of Hurricane George, although it's pushing away from the island. Heavy rain bands continue to wrap around the hurricane, dropping intense rainfall and also kicking up the waves, and still seeing some of the onshore flow here. So some higher surf and also storm surge still being felt upon Puerto Rico. The entire island had the power cut, and we also have still many people in shelters. Many homes were destroyed, and Puerto Rico has been declared a disaster area by President Clinton. Now here is where Hurricane George is at this hour, at 18.3 north, 69.1 west, and that is now 880 miles southeast of Miami. It is now moving over Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, with maximum sustained winds now having increased at 120 miles an hour. It picked up some strength as it moved into the water after Puerto Rico, and before making landfall again, it was able to gather some strength. The movement continues to be at the west at 14 miles an hour, and the pressure is dropping just a bit. Here's a look at how the tropical winds extend out from the center of the storm. The areas here in orange are the hurricane force winds, and those are out from the center 60 miles. The tropical storm force winds are extending out from the center of the storm 175 miles an hour. And so hurricane force winds are now on shore, and the tropical storm force winds are just about ready to make it to Haiti. Here's a look at the watches and warnings. Still the warnings for the Dominican Republic. They have been canceled now for Puerto Rico. We also have warnings for Haiti, the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Southeast Bahamas, and now a new warning for the eastern Cuba. The warnings mean that you can expect hurricane force winds within the next 24 hours. The areas in orange are under watches, meaning that hurricane force winds will be possible within the next 24 to 36 hours. And that would include the central Bahamas here and also central Cuba. What about beyond 36 hours? Well, the National Hurricane Official Forecast Track, National Hurricane Center Forecast Track, puts it on a little bit more of a northwest path and in the vicinity of the Keys over the next 72 hours. As you go out into time, the margin of error increases, and so the exact track is not determined at this point. It could go farther to the north, farther off to the south and west. However, it does appear that the trend will be for it to turn a little bit more to the northwest and bring at least some rain and some wind to Florida. As I mentioned, for Monroe County in South Florida, they have issued a type of evacuation where they are encouraging tourists and non-residents to leave the area. The residents do not have to evacuate at this time. They are being encouraged to take precautions should this forecast track verify. So now is the time to be getting all of your bottled water. Possibly you want to get some of your building supplies together to be able to board up your windows if need be. Here's the look at George again with the southeastern coast of the United States. Not just Florida, but all of the southeast needs to monitor this very closely for any type of changes in the path of George. We also have Tropical Storm Ivan. This is continuing to move to the north away from land. And we have Tropical Storm Jeanne picking up some strength, also beginning to take a jog a little bit more to the northwest. Your local forecast straight ahead.
We're closely tracking Hurricane George as its path moves westward, posing a future threat to Florida's coast. Details coming up on Weather Center after your local forecast.
Do a lot of traveling for business, huh? Want to earn even more Delta Sky Miles? Just apply for the Delta Sky Miles credit card from American Express. There's no faster way to earn Sky Miles. In fact, you'll get 5,000 bonus miles to start.